No. The last time me and you talked, we talked about whenever you moved down here at about the age of 12, and about a year right before that was whenever they flooded the Tennessee River, and that was the story of all the lynchings that you told me about.
Yeah.
What'd you say, it was 26?
23.
23.
Black guys.
And it was all over a female that supposedly
Took
that gotten raped or what?
took her dad's lunch out to him. Some guy got her and threw her in the damn cotton bin.
I see.
And she got away from him. But when she come back to the bank, well, she told some guys there what had just happened. And they went out there and they lined them all up upstairs, and nobody would talk. So they started hanging them. They had a heavy wire that they tied cotton up with. It had an eye on one end. They just run the wire through it and put it over their head and tighten it up and kicked them out the window. Pushed them, kicked them, knocked them. Well, when they fell, story was the first one fell, it sheared his head off. But nobody ever talked. And they didn't hang every one of them. There was a couple of three jumped out the window and got drowned because they tried to swim the river. Now, I know that's pretty close to true
Accuracy.
because about 5 years ago I was sitting in my house down here one night. They had that unsolved mysteries on.
Right.
There was a big black lady come out with a book, and she sat down at a desk. She read that whole story.
She did.
And said there's never been no justice ever done to anybody or anything about that.
That is so sad. That is so sad. About what year was that have been?
Well, it was before it was flooded, so it had to be in the 30s probably.
Right.
Because they started flooding this in 37, I believe it was. That's what I've been told. And they finished flooding it around late 41, early 42.
Times was a lot different back then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. See, you can go down this road toward the end of the road, and there's a black cemetery on a hill down there on the right.
Is it?
Now, where the white people were buried, I believe it's fenced. May be wrong, but I've always thought it had a fence around it.
Right.
And then all around outside the fence is graves that I was told was slaves and different black people. But I knew some of the later families of the Marable family.
I see.
They used to own a bunch of these big river bottoms and farmed it, and they had a lot of black slaves that worked for them.
Uh-huh. What happened to the families that those guys was associated with? Do you know? Did they move off, or did they just die off, or what happened to them?
I have no idea.
Really? Now, you said you was originally from
Here. I lived.
you was born here, but you went up to
Michigan,
and stayed for a while, and then you come back, right?
I stayed up there 40 years. I came back down here in '92.
So what year? How old was you whenever you left from here? Do you remember?
16.
16. And whenever all these hangings took place, how old was you then?
I wasn't born yet then. That had to be in the 30s. I was born in 37.
You was born in 37. And you've remembered that tale, that story, probably all your life.
I've heard that since when I started coming down here fishing. My first trip to see that lake, I was 10-year-old, so that was in 47.
And you've been hearing that same story ever since then. What was that building that got flooded? Was that some sort of like a cotton mill or something?
They baled cotton and loaded on barges.
Do you have any pictures at home of the old Danville town?
Nope.
Do you know of anybody that does?
You might find them in the library in here.
Really?
They may have some pictures. I got a picture of the old elevator that's out there in the river. And it was made from one that was in the library.
Okay.
I've got a picture in here of the old depot that was on this railroad bed down just before you get to those ponds down there.
Okay.
And it came out of the library, made from one that was in the library.
Did it? Where did Tennessee Ridge get its name?
I guess that damn big ridge up there.
And then, of course, you got Erin.
Yeah.
And then you got Stewart. There's a big cave there at Stewart. Have you ever been in that cave?
When I was little, we went in it and walked back to where it was water. That was as far as I ever went.
And how far was that, do you think? 200 or 300 feet or 2,000 or 3,000 feet?
Maybe from here to the street out there.
Probably 1,000 feet or better.
Yeah, no, 200.
And if
See,
you,
when this lake is high, that's the water in that cave stays about even with the lake.
it does. All right, if you go north of here, isn't there some little communities that's died out just north from here, like going towards Dover?
Well, there's, if you go up 232 here, all they got over there is 2-3 camping areas back by the lake, but some of them's got...
They do now, but years ago, what was back there?
Well, I don't know. I know when I was young, I knew one guy that made whiskey back in there. Go up 232, and then he was off to the left. And somebody told me in the last 15 years that some of the old barrels that he used for grain, said the end of it where the ring was packed and,
Right.
sealed.
Right.
I said, hell, you still see them old barrel rings back there where they used to make whiskey.
I'll be darned. Now, if you go down this road right here, like going back towards, I guess it would be
Well, you'll go
Waverly. Is there a little community back in there? 2 or 3 little communities back in there? Or what's back in there?
nothing.
Nothing. Just all country?
Yep.
Really?
Oh, there's a few houses here and there, but
No communities?
no store, no nothing like that. If you go from here to Waverly this way, you want to have gas enough to get to Waverly.
You better have plenty of gas then,
There
huh?
ain't nothing back through there that you...
Is it just one snaky road right after another? You probably remember whenever the majority of these roads around here wasn't even blacktop, don't you?
Oh, hell yes. I used to go down this road on a horse.
Did you?
It was a dirt road.
Right? How old are you now, Mr. Neal?
I'll be 82 years old in February. I'm getting to be one of them old farts down here by the lake.
I hear you. So you was born in 36.
37.
37.
26 or 37.
Well, I know a couple people that was born in the 20s. One of them lives right down there by me. His name is Kenneth Coleman. He's got a bunch of old tractors and stuff. He was born the year the Great Depression hit, 1929. He's still living and still going by himself and still has his independence, still drives, and still takes care of himself. And he fought in the Korean War.
He'd be about 87, 8.
Yeah. Did you ever fight in any war?
Nope. Never was in the military. Had 4 brothers. There was 5 of us boys in the family. 4 of them was in the service.
Did you regret not going into service?
No. No.
Because you worked 40 years up there in Michigan.
Yeah.
You probably drawed a pretty good pension off of them, didn't you?
No, I worked for myself up there.
Oh, did you?
No, I don't draw no pension.
So, have you ever heard any more other tales around in this area pertaining to gruesome, gross
No.
stuff like that? And you got to admit, that was pretty gruesome and gross.
Yeah, it was.
Especially if
There
there
was
never
one
has
person-
been no justice served pertaining to nobody. Of course,
One person-
probably the people that done it are now all dead, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, they're gone. That one person that grabbed that girl, if they wanted to hang his ass, go for it. But the rest of them hadn't done nothing.
Should have the one person have stood up to spared all the rest of them?
He didn't.
That shows you how sorry that he was, huh?
Well, none of them. Nobody else told on him either.
But the thing about it was what they done. Even the perpetrator that tried to have
Attempted to rape.
attempted rape. Was that really deserving of death?
No, but if he done it then, he'd do it again probably. That's the way I look at it.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, yeah. But still, I mean, in today's society,
Oh no!
you almost have to kill somebody before capital punishment is even on the table for you to go through.
And then they wait 20 to 30 years.
Right. So, I'm sure the laws, I'm sure everything was totally different back then.
Well,
Of course, they just got through going through World War I, and World War II really hadn't got up and going yet. And along about that time, along about 36, 35, something like that. So, their whole mindset, their mentality was totally different then than what it is today.
a lot of the laws that's on books now wasn't there at that time.
Right.
Back then, the people were still taking care of things that needed to be taken care of.
In other words, there really wasn't a judicial system back then. There probably was in the big city life, but as far as down here in the country, down in the middle of nowhere, people back then barely had electricity. Some of them didn't even have electricity back then, did they?
Well, hell, it wasn't nobody had electricity hardly. Damn little. I remember I was, 12, 13-year-old before we got electric in our house.
Did it amaze you whenever you seen it?
Well, yeah.
First time you seen a TV, did that amaze you whenever you seen a TV? First time you heard a radio, did that amaze you?
Well, we didn't hear. We could hear a radio because my dad listened to the news every night, about 15 minutes. He'd turn it where he'd sit with his ear right against the speaker. He didn't want to use too much battery power out of his battery.
Gotcha.
He'd let us kids all get around the radio and listen to. They had little sections of Grand Ole Opry when I was little.
Right.
Minnie Pearl and old Rod Brassfield. They'd have a 15-minute little section.
Right.
He'd let us listen to whichever one we all wanted to. The most of us wanted to. And he'd turn it where we could just barely hear it. He thought if he turned it up loud, it used more power out of the battery. It didn't,
Right. I understand what
but
you're
he
saying.
thought so.
Right. Did you have any superheroes whenever you was growing up?
Not really. No. If there was a superhero that was over 5 miles from us, hell, we never did hear about him.
No, I'm talking about cartoon characters. Like,
I didn't know what a cartoon was when I was little.
you didn't.
You know,
You never did hear Spider-Man or Batman and Robin or...
yeah, when I was 15-year-old.
Ah.
Now, one time we had a neighbor, Luther Strangfield. He hauled coal all over this area. If you wanted to buy a ton of coal, he'd bring it to you. So, he was going home one evening and he stopped out in front of our house. I was sitting on a set of steps out there, went down a bank. He said, you want to come down to my house tonight? He said, we'll watch a championship fight. So about that time, my brother come from the barn. He'd been milking a cow, and he'd come walking up. Luke told him, said, come with Neil tonight down to the house, and we'll watch the boxing on television, he called it. As he started to leave, he said, bring your dad with you if he wants to. So we got Dad to walk down there with us that night.
You remember who was boxing?
Yeah.
Who was it?
Joe Lewis and Joe DiMaggio, wasn't it?
Championship fight.
So,
Lord, that is going way back.
we went down that night, and my dad would sit with his head like this.
It's ready.
Okay.
He'd turn his head real slow and then look at the TV and turn it back. He was afraid it was going to burn his eyes.
Huh? Boy, you've seen a lot of water pass under the bridge, hadn't you, Mr. Neal?
Water went under the bridge. And I don't believe nobody enjoyed their life any damn more than I have.
There you go.
I never held a job. I never worked for nobody. All the time I was in Michigan. Well, I worked at Ford Motor Company 2 years. And got away from there and started looking for me a horse.
Did you ever believe in God? Did you ever go to church? Did you ever pray?
When I lived at home, if you was going to live with my mother and dad every Sunday morning, you got up and went to church. That's just house rules at their house.
Sure.
So we all had to go to church every Sunday.
Did you ever give your heart and your life, though, to the Lord?
Yeah.
Did you?
Sure
That's
did.
probably one reason why He's blessed you throughout all these years, and you've
Maybe
had a good...
That's why I'm still alive.
That's right. Absolutely.
But none of us know nothing about when we're going to die, do we?
No, we do not. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Always a pleasure.
I'm glad you came down and
Yes, sir. Yes,
Chat
sir.
a while.
And I got you on my YouTube channel now, and I can put your story out there to the general public. Once more, this is in the area of Danville, Tennessee.
Danville was right out in what's now the lake.
Right. And what do you figure the population at the time whenever they flooded it? Maybe 200 people? It was a thriving town, right?
It wasn't much of a town.
It wasn't much of a town?
No, because you had old docks out there where they loaded barges on. And
You think it was 50 people?
probably,
Somewhere in that neighborhood?
I'd say probably around 50.
Right. Did you hear of any other towns that got flooded out other than Danville?
No. They tore that down before the water got there.
Right. So you wasn't familiar with the places up in Kentucky that flooded whenever they flooded land between the lakes. You wasn't familiar with all them churches and
No,
All them different places
Hey,
up there.
that was like
I guess Kentucky now you can get there in a vehicle in less than an hour and a half. But back then it was probably almost like a whole different country, wasn't it?
you
No communications.
travel all day on a horse,
Yeah,
getting from here to LBF.
right. It'd be all day deal just getting over there, wouldn't it?
Now listen, something that was in the history books, and then they wrote books about it, was Jack Henson. You ever hear that name? Now there was a cave down here by Harrican Creek. It's still there. He used to sit in that cave and shoot officers
I'll be darned.
off of the boats. Now that's Civil War time.
That's Civil War time.
He used to go right up here, and he stayed right up White Oak Road.
I'll be darned. I don't mean to be rude, but I got to go because I got to catch the ferry in the next 10 minutes from here.
Okay, you better get out there. They won't wait.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I'm ready.